Welcome to your Daily 5 for Tuesday, January 27th, 2023. Last week, I reviewed a film from 1974 called Three the Hard Way, starring Jim Brown, Jim Kelly, and Fred Williamson, a movie that I was thoroughly delighted by and would tell anybody who likes action films to watch because it's great. And I think I mentioned in that review that I was going to be watching it's not officially a sequel because I don't think they were allowed to use the same names and everything, but it is basically a sequel. In everything but the character names, it is a sequel to that film, and it's from 1982, I believe, and it is called One Down, Two to Go. And it essentially reunites the three actors from the first film, Jim Kelly, Jim Brown, Fred Williamson, and adds, yes indeed, Richard Roundtree, Shaft himself, to the cast of a film that I wish that I liked as much as I enjoyed Three the Hard Way. I'm not going to say this is a bad movie by any stretch. I would still tell people if you like the first one, this is worth seeing. The thing you have to know going into it is that it is a step down in its overall quality. And there's a couple of reasons for it. Obviously, I'll get into this on Friday when I could say more, because 5 minutes is pretty constricting to get into everything about it. But essentially, the main cast somewhat reunites. And I say somewhat because for some reason, and I don't know, I didn't read, there may be some outside the actual movie explanation for this, because it doesn't make any sense in terms of the story, really. Jim Kelly is largely sidelined through this movie. Honestly, it's sort of strange that the movie credits Richard Roundtree as if he's barely in it, when he's in it as much, if not more, than Jim Kelly is really, and is more effective. So the one real complaint I have about the movie is that Jim Kelly is in a far reduced role, which I just think is a shame because he's a martial artist, and I don't know why you wouldn't want to utilize his talents more. But in any event, you still get a lot of good Fred Williamson, you still get a lot of good Jim Brown, and you had Richard Roundtree, who is, boy, it makes me wish he'd been in that first movie. I wish he'd been there, because he's so good. And when he shows up, it's just, I thought that he was, again, because of the way the credits say, and Richard Roundtree, I thought that meant he was only going to be in maybe 5 minutes of the movie, but he is not. He is actually in the movie throughout, and is at the very beginning in a very significant role, and at the end in a very significant way. So, if you like Richard Roundtree, you will not be disappointed. I mean, he's not in the entirety of the movie. This is really Fred Williamson and Jim Brown's film, which is not a complaint. But Richard Roundtree is also a significant presence. So he is not just there to deliver a couple of lines at the beginning and the end and you barely see him. He is in the movie properly. He is just kind of at the beginning and the end, but still in a way that matters. But the movie itself, the other real complaint, if it's even really a complaint, it's just more of an observation, the thing that keeps it from being as great as Three the Hard Way was, is the stakes are less outrageous and less significant. The first one was about a white supremacist plot to wipe out black people, which is both bonkers and a huge plot point. I mean, that's a big deal. The second movie is essentially about guys trying to get back money that they won in a bet on a martial arts tournament. Now, don't get me wrong, it's certainly a worthy reason to go after somebody if they steal your money, I understand that, but it doesn't have the same gravitas that the first one does, and also it doesn't have that same outrageous element. The white supremacist leader in the first movie is such a weird and interesting and really well-played character, and there isn't an equivalent of that in this movie. That's what it's missing. It doesn't have a central villain that is really electrifying in the way that the Feather character was in Three the Hard Way. So again, the movie's not bad. It's better than a lot of other movies I've seen, even movies that are far more recent. It's still entertaining. It's still great to see all these actors at their prime doing their thing. It's still worth watching, but it is not anywhere. I shouldn't say anywhere. It just doesn't reach the heights that Three the Hard Way did. And that's the only really negative thing I could say about it. Otherwise, if you like Three the Hard Way, this does feel like a direct sequel. It really does. This feels like if you just imagine the characters have the same names, nothing changes. Nothing at all changes. And where the cities they're based on. But honestly, that's all secondary. It doesn't really matter. The movie is still worth seeing. If you go into Three the Hard Way and come out expecting another movie of that caliber, no pun intended, there's a lot of gunplay in this film, you might be a little let down, but if you come in just understanding that it's still a fun movie that isn't quite as instantly classic as that first one was, then you're still going to have a good time. So again, it's called One Down, Two to Go, watchable on multiple different free streaming avenues. It's a good time, just not quite as good as its predecessor. Later.